As you can tell, we're having some technical difficulties again, so everyone needs to speak loudly for anything. So I'm going to try to be as loud as I can. If anybody has trouble hearing me, let me know. So we'll call a meeting to order. We begin with a moment of silent prayer and the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a quorum present. I'll begin with the notice of meeting. This is a meeting of the Washington County Board of Supervisors. Prior to this meeting, public notice was given by posting a copy of the agenda in the office of the county clerk and emailing the agenda to the West Bend Daily News, which is the official newspaper. In addition, the agenda was emailed to CNI newspapers, the Express News, Kewaskum Statesman, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, WIBD, WMBZ Radio, and WTKM Radio. The above action is in conformity with the state of Wisconsin's open meeting law. We're going to move item 6 before a consent agenda. It is a motion to suspend the rules to allow for teleconferencing and voting via remote access. We have 3 people around. Supervisor McCune, Supervisor Hartwig. We'll do this on a roll call vote.
Basil.
Aye.
Bertram. Supervisor Bertram. Is he not on the phone? Okay.
Oh, yeah. On the phone, they can't vote until we suspend the rules.
Oh, sure. Bishop.
Aye.
Vassar. Brandner.
Aye.
Brandt.
Aye.
Oh. All right. Balua.
Yep.
Berg.
Aye. Yep.
Carr.
Yep.
Oh, you're on the phone too? Okay. Dice is on the phone. Gallitz.
Yes.
Gonring.
Yes.
Hartwig.
Here.
Yep. Jenkins.
Aye.
Kelling.
Yes.
Krebs.
Aye.
Creefall.
Aye.
McEwen.
Yes.
Mary.
Yes.
Merton.
Aye.
Mahalik.
Aye.
Schleif.
Aye.
Sorcy. Sorcy.
Yes.
Okay. Steffen.
Yes.
Smisek.
Aye.
All right.
Okay. We begin with the consent agenda. The minutes are March 11th. Entertain a motion to accept. Supervisor Sorcy, Supervisor Smisek. Any
Correct.
The
Correction
correction?
on page 2, line 29. Remove Bossert and Gallitz from the ayes.
We'll make the correction.
Okay. So friendly amendment. Any other corrections? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Consideration and upon request, reading of resolution and ordinances, 2019 Resolution 69, confirmation of health emergency proclamation of March 13th, 2020. Motion by Bullowa, second by Supervisor Mary.
So,
Okay. We'll begin. Yeah, why don't you take it?
so the resolution that's before you tonight is a confirmation procedure in large part. The county board chairman has already proclaimed an emergency. By our code, has that authority to do so, and yet the county board, within 30 days by our code, needs to confirm. Since you weren't going to have a county board meeting over the course of the next 30 days, that's the reason for the special meeting. You'll note, if you've read through it, I hope you've all had a chance to take a look at the resolution, that it's very standard. If you've had a chance to look at any other counties, they're very similar. There's one exception to that similarity, and that is what this resolution really does is authorizes the county administrator and eventually the county executive, because this will span over the election, assuming the election we will continue on April 7th, and we learned in executive that we shouldn't assume anything. But this resolution gives that position the authority basically of the entire county board. This position becomes essentially public policy maker and executor. And therefore, I asked prior to this resolution coming out that the last be it therefore resolved, which originally, when we took it to executive committee, stated that all decisions needed to be reported to the executive committee on a weekly basis. At the executive committee meeting just 45 minutes ago or so, the executive committee modified that, and you can see that modification on page 2. The county executive and/or administrator will make these decisions in consultation with the chairman. The intent of that entire section is really, and the original proposal was really to ensure that the check and balance of legislative body and executive body remain intact even in the midst of an emergency. So that is different than every other county is doing, to the best of my knowledge. I know I've looked at least 2 or 3. The executive and/or administrator is given carte blanche power to basically do whatever he or she deems necessary and appropriate. I can tell you from a theoretical standpoint, this provides at least some check, allowing for, in this case, the county board chairman, if he at this time or she, after April 7th, if that were to happen, it allows the county board chairman to basically call the executive committee meeting into session, and/or ultimately the county board to act as a check on the county executive. So for just a ridiculous example, if the county executive decided, I'm going to give $50,000 bonuses to everybody on the incident command team, county board chairman would have the ability to quick call a meeting and stop that from happening. Or if a decision was already made, begin to unwind whatever decision process or procedure was put into place. I felt that's an important thing regardless of whether as I'm county administrator or as whoever the next county executive is, has that check and balance in place. So what you're looking at now will continue the proclamation, affirm the proclamation that the county board chair made, and add the provision of we're going to retain a check and balance in the system. I will tell you from a practical standpoint, that check and balance has been there all along. The county board chairman has been part of every substantive decision that's been made to this point, including being a member of our incident command team, every meeting that we're making decisions. The county board chairman has either been physically there or on the phone making those decisions. And there's a lot of people that are at the table making those decisions as well. One thing that's not reflected here, and for the sake of people watching in TV land, I believe this is happening. If it's not, correct me. We are also going one step farther, and the county board chairman is periodically calling people on the county board to try and keep you all in the loop as best as possible as well. And my anticipation, my expectation is that'll continue as long as this pandemic continues, or at least as best we can and seems reasonably appropriate. So our goal is to try and keep the legislative body engaged and involved and up to date as best as possible. Of course, we're trying to do that with a lot of stakeholders, so it may not be the most frequent updates, but our hope is that it happens sufficiently enough that you have a handle and a grasp on what's going on. So those are the changes to the resolution. It was also, I should just point out, if you had previously looked at the resolution, executive or administrator was added. So as an example, line 39 on page 1, that the county board chair and the county administrator, line 45, the county administrator or county executive. So,
but line 40, you should also add executive or executive.
The reason that it's not necessary because of the timing. That will become irrelevant after April 7th anyway.
Okay.
That whole section. Basically, that's allowing for us to communicate openly and broadly.
There's a provision in Chapter 11 of Wisconsin statutes that prohibit somebody who's running for office, who's an elected official, from disseminating essentially 50 pieces of mail or propaganda, if you will, that's essentially the same thing. By allowing this and this particular be resolved, it would allow the county board chairman and the county administrator to essentially bypass that particular rule so we can get the best, most accurate information out to the public as possible. Once the election occurs, that rule no longer applies, and that's why we didn't put it there.
Supervisor Krebs?
Just to confirm which resolution we're looking at, I have two printed ones in front of me. One Josh handed to me, and one Mary handed. Which are they the same or are they different?
They're different.
The one that Josh handed you removed Washington County Board of Supervisors on line 7, page 2.
Okay, so just the one that Josh handed.
The one that Josh handed you is the current, right?
Supervisor Jenkins?
So how does this fit into as far as like a time frame? Do we have to do a new resolution to suspend these powers, and what does that look like?
The way this particular resolution is drafted, it anticipates that the powers that you're granting, if you will, the county administrator or county executive would sunset when the emergency is over. Right now, I believe we have a date of May 13th, 2020 as to when the proclamation would expire. We're hoping by then things will go back to normal, but if not, this board could certainly meet again. That is actually the date of the May County Board meeting, and we could extend it again at that time if necessary, but we wanted to give it a sunset provision so that we're not allowing the administrator or executive permanent powers that aren't really permissible or shouldn't be handed.
Would that be handed again with the county chair to either extend it or call the emergency powers done?
It should be brought back by resolution to the body to extend or end it. And we can end it sooner if things happen.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Supervisor Merton?
Thank you. I just want to call to your attention also on page 2, line 1 and line 5. Chairman should be chairperson. Thank you.
No. Discuss that.
Front side.
It was decided at the executive committee level that chairman is a position, not gender related. Just as you would be congressman,
Policeman.
policeman.
Just take out the, well, it's according to state statutes, it's referred to as chairperson.
Did you want to make a motion to?
No, just,
No, okay.
we'll clean it. It actually contradicts itself a couple times, so we'll clean it up.
Okay. Okay. We might be able to vote.
No, we're not.
No, we're not?
No, we're doing all voice votes then. All voice votes. You can use
All
your mics
voice
though.
vote.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, any further discussion? Marilyn, is there, okay. Oh, the microphones are gonna work.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, this is,
Mr. Chairman, would you like me to give any update under this one, or would you prefer I provide all that update after?
correct, yeah, why don't you update on what's been going on? So, go ahead, sorry.
Sure. Okay, so do we have, we were going to project an image. Do we have that? No?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to just give you as much of a briefing as I can on what's happened over the course of the last 6 days. Essentially, we've been in the office every single day prepping on Friday was the original date that we really started instituting the incident command team. They've been meeting every single day since in some capacity, including Saturday and Sunday. The proclamation was made by the chairman at that time, and what that began was a series of things. Now, one thing to keep in mind is every single day that we formally met, Friday, Monday, and moving forward, about halfway through the meeting, we would be interrupted by an announcement by the president or by the governor, and half of what we worked on became irrelevant, like the bars and restaurants all closing, as an example. But we've essentially been working on a structure over time that would slowly bring the county into full emergency mode. Okay, so you notice, I'm sure, that the county operation is still going. For all intents and purposes, it's the same, other than the number of people coming in is down to a trickle, although it seems to have picked up in the last 24 hours for some reason. But there are a number of things that have changed in the last 5 days, many of which the public won't notice, but internally we certainly have. So we have had briefings with a laundry list, and so when I said before that what's going to change with this resolution is really that we're trying to communicate with as many stakeholders as possible. So we had conference calls with all of the chief elected officials and many administrators from across the county. We had a conference call with them on Friday at 3 o'clock to try and get them up to date. We are planning conference calls with all of the fire chiefs, police chiefs, EMS chiefs or leaders, and we're also talking about doing the same with nonprofit agencies, sometime probably in the next week or two. So really we've done and are doing our best to communicate with everybody outside of the organization. You'll note from Friday to up until I believe it was Tuesday, we didn't have a case. We are now, the most recent data that I have received was literally within the last couple of hours. I don't want to get the number wrong, so I don't want to read it to you. Please bear with me. Washington County is now up to its third confirmed case. Ozaukee County has 4. And that information is changing in real time. So we now have cases. We're working through those cases. The department heads had a meeting on Monday, updating the latest and greatest information on where things are at. Basically what we are doing as an incident command team on the organizational side is propping up the incident command structure, so we're building things out so that we can start operating in an emergency capacity rather than our normal day-to-day operations. That means staffing is beginning to change. I'll give you an example of that. Yesterday, we rolled out information to staff communicating that anybody 65 or older who works for the county that can work from home, should work from home, or should feel free to work from home. If they aren't able to work from home, they can take PTO, ELB, or be unpaid and go home without any need for an excuse or an explanation. Just notify their supervisor and HR. Interestingly, several went and worked from home. Those who can't work from home, almost nobody left. So they're still working. Our plan is to continue to phase down. If you've watched the news or watched any other counties, there's every extreme you can imagine. Outagamie on Friday closed everything non-essential without describing what that meant. So my understanding there was some confusion even amongst their own staff. The least extreme was really probably what we're doing, trying to slowly go down and staying open completely, of course. And so there's been everything in between. Right now where we're at is really folks who can work from home have been encouraged to do that if they have the ability, and many have. Our doors have been open, still are open as of today. The next step that we'll take tomorrow is that we will have anybody who's vulnerable in that vulnerable category or at-risk category that's described in all the CDC guidelines. If they haven't already left, some of them have, we will give them the same courtesy as anybody 65 years of age or older. If you haven't left already, please feel free to use PTO or ELB or unpaid time, but put your family and yourself first. And then we start to move to the next phases, which really is kind of getting to that essential, non-essential. Now, over the course of the last 3 days, a whole team of people have been trying to ascertain in this environment. Now, I'll take you back a year ago to Snowmageddon 2019, where we closed the courthouse and said non-essential staff stay home. That's what Allegheny County did for this instance, which makes no sense at all. In this instance, we tried to ascertain who is essential for this crisis, meaning how do we stay open, and who is non-essential. Now there's really, in my opinion, there's two crises happening. The virus is one, and we need to take that very seriously. It certainly has life and death consequences for people. But the panic is the second crisis. And that was brought up in administrative committee at length. And I think that's true and right. And so we're trying to address both. And there's both personal panic as well as economic panic that's happening right now. I'll note to you that a lot of our discussions at the incident command team have revolved around how do we manage that panic, continue to provide essential functions of the county, which in almost every case, all of our functions are essential to some variety, and come down to a point where we don't want people coming in, making contact with one another. We want everybody to be able to follow the CDC guidelines. That being said, we are a government agency. We are exempt from a lot of those guidelines, but nonetheless, we're going to try to live up to them. So as we get past the 65 years and older and the at-risk folks, the next step really is how do we keep our offices running, but really closed to people coming in and out. On Tuesday and most of Wednesday, people seem to be getting along fine. Our traffic was almost zero. For some reason today, people decided that they needed to get passports and they needed to get birth certificates in more than the days before. And I'm afraid the longer this goes, the more that'll start to pick up, like we think this is vacation or something. So in the next 24 hours, certainly 48 business hours, we're going to begin to shut down to a point where we'll ask people not to come in. Most of the business we do, we're finding we can do telephonically or electronically. We're going to encourage people to call in the best and most they can and manage things that way. That'll include every function that the county does with very few exceptions. So if you think of even things that the district attorney and the circuit court are doing, a lot of those things are being done telephonically or through video conferencing. Not everything, but many things. A lot of things are getting postponed. A lot of the functions on the floor above us, clerk, treasurer, register of deeds, a lot of those functions can be done through the mail. We haven't done it that way because we've always tried to be very customer service oriented. We will begin to go to all mail. There's some exceptions, the marriage licenses in the clerk's office is an example. So we're comfortable that a lot of our functions will be able to push off face-to-face meetings for a period of time. That being said, that period of time varies in how long it can last. So when we start to talk about operations across the street at the Public Agency Center, human service functions, particularly mentally ill, child welfare, things of that variety, we can get away with, yesterday, I walked the halls of both of those divisions yesterday. There were a lot of clients canceling, mental health type cases, psychiatric visits, counseling visits that canceled this week. That's fine for a week. For 2 weeks, maybe, I begin to get very uncomfortable. When we get to 3 and 4 weeks, we've got a real problem. The same exists for case workers who are visiting folks. We can do it telephonically, we can do it video conferencing for a while. In some cases, in other cases, we're delivering medicines. These are things people have to have on a daily basis. So we've got a team that's working through each one of those individual cases. I will tell you, I've never been more proud to have the department head team we've got. They are figuring out rotations to keep the doors open for the cases that do need to come in. They're figuring out how to work with their individual caseloads to get the people the things that they need without completely shutting things off. And we're able to do this all while at least virtually staying open. So we're working through that. Now, why am I explaining all of this to you ad nauseum? If you look up on the screen, really what we're trying to do is slowly take ourselves down from normal operation to, if this thing goes on for a month or more, we're going to go into emergency mode, and it's kind of going to be like a refrigerator system where you shut everything down until that only which has to be running, so you're saving energy. The same kind of thing is what we're building out. What you're looking at here, and we didn't get a chance to get this corrected from the administrative meeting, but what you're looking at is, think of a grain elevator as an example, West Bend elevator. You put every function that you have into different bins, and when you need it, you'll pull it up to the top of the elevator and you dispense it where you need it. The same thing is going to happen ultimately with our staff. What I have been drilling into everybody since Friday is that things are going to change. We want everybody to stay safe. We're very concerned about them and their families. It's literally why I've walked the halls of nearly every division. And we're public servants first. So no matter what happens, we need people who are ready to be on call at any time for the functions that remain to protect the quality of life of the citizens of Washington County. So there are going to be different circumstances where we need different people. If you look at this chart, what you're looking at is how do we pool the resources, human resources we have, and deploy them. So think of on the left-hand side as an example, there's elections that are running in 19 days or so. If we need poll workers, you all go to the polls very frequently. A lot of those folks fall into this at-risk category. If they don't show up, where are we going to get poll workers? Well, we can certainly put out a call for volunteers, but first and foremost, we've got a lot of employees that we can poll for a day or 2 days or 3 days and redeploy them over to elections. So that might be one example. Something much more serious is home delivered meals. Same exact situation. A lot of our folks that deliver home delivered meals are at-risk population, serving other at-risk populations. Do we need to pull employees, bring them into that pool of flex and redeploy them elsewhere? That's another just simple example of how we might need to do things. So we literally might have a circumstance where you go from being a highway employee to being a poll worker to being a meal delivery person within 72 hours. Okay, and then maybe back to highway. So that's one example of the type of person that we need. There also might be a more permanent need. So I'll give you a different, for instance. The jail is going to have to stay clean, and there's a probability that COVID-19 is going to get into the jail at some point. The Samaritan is another example of that. God forbid it happens, but the rate of the case of people getting this virus is something like 80%, and therefore the chances are it will happen. We need to have people who we can redeploy to keep those places clean and operating in both cases. So we may have a situation, I'll use the same highway employee who we pull off the road and put them into cleaning the jail constantly until such time as we're able to go back to some sense of normalcy. So those are two examples. The third bucket is really flex staff within departments. So think of social worker, child welfare. When we start getting social workers who are sick and dropping off, or family members who are sick and dropping off and falling into the FMLA category, we may be in a need to pull someone out of child welfare and put them into a mental health case for a short period of time just to get us through. So we're thinking through those scenarios as well. So that's another group of employees. The final group is what we're calling, after the administrative committee's brilliant suggestion, calling a call-in group. Okay, so now these are folks that we're going to go through a list of all of our employees, and identify somewhere between 10 and 25, and I will tell you right now, the longer this goes on, the higher that number goes. But we are literally going to tell them, go home. You are, for all intents and purposes, you are on 14-day quarantine because you're healthy. Don't leave your house. Don't go to the movies. Don't go to the grocery store. Your job is literally to sit at home and stay healthy, because the moment that those things start to happen with the FMLA and people here getting COVID-19 and et cetera, we are going to call you and you must come into work. So we're paying you to be at home on call, but the reason we're paying you at home on call full pay is because when we call, you're coming. So we are working towards developing what that looks like. The intent of all of this is there's going to come a time and place when there will be employees who appears as though they're not doing anything. They very much are doing something, and that is being ready to be called in. I anticipate a time where I won't throw percentages around, but significant pools of employees are either A, have COVID-19 themselves, or B, are on FMLA, that I'm going to have to figure out a way to backfill. And the incident, and when I say I really mean the incident command team, is sitting down together figuring out where are we going to pull people from and move them to, just to keep essential functions moving. And now when I say essential functions, that's a lot of things. Eventually, if it gets bad enough, there may be a point where we just can't keep the clerk's office open or keep the treasurer's office open, or we really get down to small functions. I believe it's more likely that we'll have a time where people start to just act normal, that this virus is happening, and hopefully the antivirals take effect. But if not, we may be on a full shutdown. We're planning as if what San Francisco did is what everybody will do. We had a term in the military called expect the worst and hope for the best. We're expecting the worst and hoping for the best. So this is an extreme example of what's going to happen. We will be working towards implementing it, similar to the resolution that you're looking at today. I did not feel comfortable simply making this decision, even with Don in the room, without communicating it to you, getting feedback both from administrative committee and from the legislative body. This is a humongous public policy decision that really I am making, and I recognize that. And I guess I'm really not asking for your approval, I'm asking for your blessing. I don't really think we have much of a choice, to be quite frank. The stuff that we're talking about is too serious to litigate. On the other hand, I think you should talk through it. And I hope you come to the same conclusion as I do. But I really think you've got a whole group of people. I can't tell you how impressed I am. I literally walked the halls of the Parks and Planning Department, Mental Health Division, Child Welfare, Economic Support, the third floor here, the second floor here, Child Support, Clerk of Courts. These people know exactly why they're here. I have never been more impressed with people in my life, including when I was in the military, because there's some boneheads in the military. But they're ready to do whatever we need them to do, but we've got to have their back. So I'm asking for you to please discuss this. I want it discussed because it's a huge decision, and I'm asking for your support.
Supervisor Kellum.
Okay, Josh, first of all, thank you for that explanation. I think it's a very good plan because it, first of all, keeps our county open. It keeps us going every day. It keeps as much of our departments going as we possibly can. As well as the pool of the call-in group, I like because it gives us a little hedge on our bets, if you will, to use a gambling term. It came up in administration, and I've been following this on online and looking at all the different news sites. And there's two consensus of opinion, and I brought it up in administration.
I'm going to do it probably a little bit, parse my words a little bit better than I did there. But a lot of people feel that this is like the flu, and some people will get it, and some people will die because that's what happens during the flu. And other people kind of look at it more as could be the end of the world type of thing. I think it's somewhere in the middle. This is not something that all these things that we're doing right now are not going to stop this thing. And I think that's the main confusion that people have, that somehow we're gonna shelter in place and this thing's going to die out. No. This is coming. Most likely, quite a few people in this room right now are going to get it. Whether or not you might pass from it remains to be seen. But even people who don't have problems with their age or whatever other underlying underlying problems do die from this. There have been some instances of this. So it's actually a lot more critical. So to put a point on it, everybody knows what I do for a living, or at least if you don't, basically I make boxes, caskets. And my company is ramping up production. I want you to let that sink at home for a moment. We're always very forward in our thinking. We track the flu every year as part of our, we work with the CDC, we track cancer, heart rate, everything that can be tracked in death, my company does. And we utilize all that information to decide just how much and where to deploy our services, just like the county is doing now. And all I know is that they ramped up a second shift. So this is serious. Now, hopefully we're wrong and my company loses a lot of money. They're not famous for losing a lot of money. Okay, so I just want to sink that in and let you get a real good feel for what's really going on here. I do like this plan, Josh. I think it's a very good plan. Like I said, it keeps county services open. I think, and it will also hedge our bets a little bit to make sure we've got a little backup plan. So, good job. Thank you.
Supervisor Mahalik.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I hope we do not need your services, Dennis. A couple of different things. First is one of the concerns that was brought up in administrative was the fact that we're looking at something that is going to be looked at through the lens of, gee, you're paying people to sit home. Well, what I talked with Administrator Shulman about before our meeting was, and I think that this is something that we would work into it, and that is some type of a contract. If we're going to be literally paying for it, you know what, I was joking to say a staycation, understand that there are going to be certain parameters. Again, we're asking these people to shelter in place, that they would not be going out. Their job is to stay well. So there's going to be that. You know, you can turn on the Netflix or whatever. Hopefully some board games, maybe some cribbage, but you're not going to have people coming in and out of your house all the time. You're going to be staying in place, and because of that, we're going to pay you a full-time salary and maintain your benefits. For that, should there be a need, you will be called up and you will be required to come in. If you would change your mind, that would be a very serious offense because you'd have a contract that we would have hopefully in place. You know, work through the county attorney, Attorney Stearns, so we would put it in place such that, you know, we're going to pay you to stay at home, which is, I think, not a bad idea when you consider what we're doing, but we're looking at it from the angle of making sure that we have the requisite resources should we have the illness actually hit the county, and I think there's a very good possibility that some of the people that are critical within our infrastructure are going to get sick. And that's one of the things I think that we have to look at, and would urge you because of that to consider a positive vote on this, because, or if we're not looking for a vote, at least a blessing, as Josh mentioned. So we're all going in this with eyes wide open. And I don't know if anybody else is going to talk. There was one other thing, but my sometimer's is kicking in and I didn't write it down, so I might come back to you real quick.
Yeah, I want to, sorry, Supervisor Bishop.
One concern that was brought forward in the earlier meetings was, are we overreacting by paying these people not to do anything? My thoughts on that issue is, if it gets bad enough that we have to call these people forward, the people that they will be serving are our most vulnerable residents, and we need to have healthy people to serve these. If we don't need them, good for us.
Supervisor Krebs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know everyone is replaceable, but Josh, could you touch on the people that are harder to replace, like the incident command team, and what succession plans are in place for that?
Yeah, sure. So our incident command team, I think, is 10 people. And so there's a structure that goes with the incident command team. We actually have 2 incident commanders. So Kirsten Johnson is the public health officer. Given the nature of the circumstance that we're in, this is a health crisis, and therefore she is at the top, as am I. And then after that, the org chart breaks down exactly who falls in next and how, if somebody drops off, they move up the chain. This brings up a really good thing to discuss, and that is people are already not able to come in here into this facility at a high rate. So we already have people who are on that chart who can't physically come into our buildings. One of the things I failed to mention in my long diatribe was that on Friday we also announced travel restrictions, essentially, and 14-day quarantine restrictions. We spelled those out to employees. Essentially anybody who came back from anywhere out of state prior to 4:30 on Friday and arrived back to work after 4:30 on Friday had to self-quarantine for 14 days, no exceptions. Anyone who made the decision to leave the state of Wisconsin after 4:30 on Friday, oh, and by the way, if they came back to work after Monday and had planned this trip, generally speaking, these are people who were gone for the whole week before all of this started, they're being paid and they're working at home, generally speaking. Anybody who made a decision to leave the state after 4:30 on Friday was making that decision knowing full well they were going to come back and they weren't going to be paid. So there's a lot of people who fell in the first bucket and a lot of people who are department head level or right below department head level. So we've already got a list of probably more than half a dozen people in the top of our command who are calling into meetings and doing as much as they can from home. So we're already feeling what you're describing, that kind of first phase of what happens when a director of an agency goes down, and in every case the next one has stepped up. And so all of that infrastructure is built out and will continue to be built out. There are contingency plans that we're already starting to formulate, and they're really early, but where we have people who can't leave here at all, that we put restrictions on certain positions, and it'll be all the way up and down the whole salary structure that you build, but it has more to do with the job type than it does with where you are on the salary scale. But we have contingency plans that we're building out where they just may not leave here at all. You might have to live here for a period of time. So we're taking it extremely seriously, and that includes we will not get to a point where we truly shut everything down. So if you're seeing other counties that say they're truly shutting down, it just isn't happening, especially for us with the jail and Samaritan specifically. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Supervisor McEwen.
I don't really have questions relative to this, and I want to thank Committee Chair, Mr. Mahalik, and Chairman, and Josh for doing what you've done. I've got some questions that are just what I've seen in other areas where some what ifs, if you don't mind, just talk us through. So captains here taking us through the seas, through some rough weather. When you have powers above you, whether it's from an emergency standpoint, whether it's from the federal FEMA aspect of it, from actions that are done at a higher level, or at in our case, the state of Wisconsin level, which, as Don, as you had said, I'm seeing things evolve, we all are, in real time. We want to stay open. We want to go with this plan. I don't know who I'm asking this question of, so I'm going to throw it out there, and I'm sorry, I did not sit in that meeting on purpose, to be honest with you, in the previous meeting before executive. So if this was asked, and I'm duplicating it, I apologize, but I know there have been people that have asked this question. What happens, are there people above us, principally the governor, or at a FEMA level, that have priority to tell us what we can and cannot do within your plan? And if so, and it's happening in other states, you brought up San Francisco and California, there's a whole bunch of different things going on right there. In talking to Utah, I've been going through some things with my work, with what I've been watching and what's going on. You know what's happening in New York. What plan have we put in place to consider what could be forced upon us in your plan? And if so, or what have we done?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I said in the beginning, this is fluid. Every single meeting we've had where the whole IC team are together, we don't get halfway through the meeting and what you're describing happens every time. It's extremely frustrating, but I think it's just the nature of the beast. And so when I said that we're beginning to think about how do we pare down departments to the lowest common denominators, and maybe having people literally living here, that's exactly what I meant. I think we're trying to think of every scenario, but it's almost impossible to. And so I think what will end up happening is that there will be more and more and more of our employees that fall into the left two buckets, where we're just putting them wherever we possibly can to get, it doesn't, at the end of the day, there's a law that says, I'm sure, there's a law that probably says a case manager must meet with a mental health case out in the community and provide them with their medicines and all of that stuff for good reasons. But when you get down to, I literally have no more social workers. A highway employee can probably deliver those same medicines if need be. So those are the types of things that team is beginning to map out. I'm sure you'll notice, a lot of my teammates aren't here today, and that's odd. Matt Furno is one of them. Matt's working from home. It's horrible because I rely on him all the time. It's beautiful because he can just sit in a room and map out all the craziest things that a brilliant mind like that could think. So that's exactly what he's doing. I literally assigned him the task of go back 100 years and look at the lessons learned from Spanish fever and tell me what are we supposed to be thinking about right now. I don't know what else we can do, but we're trying to do everything we can to think it through.
Don, if I can just finish up, I probably myself.
Okay.
So again, through the rough storm, I think we have great teams in place. Josh, your managers, we have great employees. Ahead, the workload for, as you call it, Washington County's finest, their jobs, there's a lot of added responsibilities that this is black and white, but the real world out there that they're going to be going through, and I know all of us, all the supervisors, want to thank all the employees for stepping up, doing what they're doing, and for what's going to be coming. So I'm glad we have the leaders in place we have right now. So thank you.
My hand is raised even though you can't see it.
Oh. Chris, go ahead.
Thank you. I too want to applaud Josh and Don and the team that you've put together. I think the actions that you have taken up to this point are totally appropriate, and I have a great faith in the department heads that we have here in Washington County, because all of you are on a committee that works closely with one or more department heads, so you know the caliber of people we have here. So Josh has a great team behind him, with him, and standing with all of us. So again, I also want to put my thanks to them for the job that they've done up to this point. I'm definitely in favor of this resolution, as well as the amendments that were proposed at executive committee that put into place the checks and balances that we need to have there. So I'm in agreement with that as well. And I hope the rest of the supervisors are when this comes up for a vote. So thank you for that. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Supervisor Bossert also has a question.
Yes, I'm thinking about the situation where we're talking about potential staffing shortages, and I'm thinking about the workforce in general with all the people right now who are suffering job loss, including small business owners who don't even have the option for unemployment insurance, but also regular workers who their best option is unemployment insurance. Are we looking at ways that we can supplement our workforce with people who are not currently part of our workforce, either through staffing agencies or temporary hires?
We have talked about, did everybody hear the question?
Yeah.
Okay. We have talked about a variety of HR functions. How much hiring do we do of currently vacant positions? How much recruiting and the type of recruiting that you're talking about, how much of that do we do? If things get to the point that you're describing in your question, I don't think we're going to have any shortage of bodies, because if we're getting to the point that you're describing, that means that a lot of our functions will likely go away, and we'll just move our own people. That being said, there are certain functions, I think of CNAs, LPNs, and RNs, and maybe even jailers, that we can't just throw anybody into jobs like that. So it's, yes, we've talked about it, we are talking about it, but this is exactly why the concept, I'm sorry those of you on the phone can't see this, but that's why the concept that we've built out is what we've built out, because we have so many resources at our disposal, human resources at our disposal, that quite frankly, I think it would be largely a waste of time to go and bring somebody who's been a waitress for the last several years who's been laid off in, when we literally have someone with similar types of skill sets, similar types of skill sets, I'll leave it at that, that we could put in the same position. They're already on our payroll and they already know how the county works. So if we get to that point, certainly it's something we'll consider, and we definitely are continuing all discussions and dialogue about workforce, but I don't, at this moment in time, that's not our concern.
Okay, Supervisor Hall.
Thank you. I remember my second point, Mr. Chairman. One of the things that I brought up in administrative is to take that telescope and turn it around and look through the other end, so you have a different lens really to concentrate on. The news that you're watching is constantly pounding the numbers for COVID infections, COVID deaths. Okay, COVID, of course, is a coronavirus disease. It's a contention of that 19, meaning the year that it started, because it started in December, so that's where COVID-19 comes from. It's important to understand that because we're going into this pretty much lockdown of our economy and of our society, a lot of people that normally would have gotten the regular flu and died, and the numbers vary, we're talking between 20,000 and a bad year up to 90,000 people without any COVID anything, that would have died, are not going to get it because of the extraordinary measures that we're all taking that we didn't take before, which is the constant reminder of washing hands, using your little Lysol wipes or Clorox wipes, all of those things in concert with the fact that we're separating ourselves with the social distancing. So yes, we'll have an increase with the COVID infections and the COVID deaths, but we're also, I think, very safely to assume we're going to have many fewer deaths with the regular flu that people won't get because of this. So again, just as to alleviate some of the fear and that there is something to look at when we're talking total deaths, and I think that that's one of the things that they should be bringing up in the news. And I wish the news would be more responsible, and that is not only, of course, how many people are infected, how many people are coming through this and are fine, and the numbers of people that aren't getting, if we can, compared to maybe a bad year of the flu, and giving some perspective and some balance, so we're not dealing with a crisis of worry or of angst. I'm sure some of you may be getting, I know as the mayor, I'm getting a number of phone calls from people who you can just tell they're very frustrated with all the things that are happening, and it's a matter of me just listening and offering some help with them and some of the information that they're looking for. But again, please support this so we can get on. Thank you.
Supervisor Malone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is kind of more of a general topic, but it has to do with communication of, say, changes in the county function to the public. Do we have ways on how we can communicate what's going on that's not coming from a news channel, but coming directly from us?
Yes, thank you, good question. So we are working on all of that, and we've been using every communication medium and resource that we have. So we have 5, 6, or 7 Facebook accounts, something like that. Cumulatively, we probably have 40,000 followers across the county, give or take. We're utilizing that heavily. So when we announced the emergency declaration, can you please go take that for me? When we announced the emergency declaration, we did it by Facebook Live, and we had a lot more viewers than we normally have. I'll just leave it at that. When we announced the first case of COVID-19 in Washington County, we did the same thing. We did it across all of our platforms. We had hundreds of more viewers than we've ever had. And I anticipate the longer this goes on, the more we'll get. Our followers, or whatever it is on Facebook, is exponentially growing right now, faster than I've seen it since we started it. So those platforms are working very well. We're putting out daily briefings to employees. The best communicators are oftentimes our employees. The word of mouth is incredible, travels incredibly fast. We're also utilizing our website, and we've modified it in many ways. If you looked at it recently, there's a coronavirus tab. We're using Twitter to a lesser extent. A lot of Washington County-ites, if that's a term, don't use Twitter, so we're not using it as much. But the local press has had articles every single day, the Daily News. The Washington County Insider has had some things. And so we're trying to hit every medium that we've got, and we're relying on our own. This is going to probably sound weird from someone who's running for office, but it makes me sad to see the local press dying, because there's no way to get information to people, and we're drowned out by Milwaukee County and everything that's happening there. So when we announced our first case of COVID-19, we didn't, to my knowledge, unless I'm wrong, I don't think we got one contact from a Milwaukee Journal or Milwaukee anybody. So we're using every resource that we have, and I think that's, quite frankly, all we can do.
There's no way to scroll. We wouldn't have the ability to scroll anything on TV screens in any capacity, would we?
I'm looking at John Elke. We would have certainly the local TV stations are a source, although how many people are watching that, I don't know. But when we sent out, or when we talked to local government leaders about our emergency declaration, we asked them to share that information on their Facebook pages. How much they do that, certainly we don't have control over that, but those are things that certainly we can do, and an employee for the city of West Bend who works in that department is standing in the room, so hopefully that'll happen more and more. But it's limited. You're not going to see it when you're watching a television show. I would say sports, but there's no sports on, so you're not going to see it when you're watching a television show, and we don't have that type of access. And quite frankly, from their perspective, there's nothing newsworthy enough. Now, when the first death happens in Washington or Ozaukee County, I'm sure you'll read about that. Hopefully it's more than just on the scrolling bottom line, but beyond that, we're going to get to the point, folks, where we're talking about hundreds and thousands of cases, and this is not going to be newsworthy anymore. It'll be, I don't know who described it, but it'll be a running total that just shows up on probably the bottom left corner of the daily newscast, and that's it. So we're doing what we can, and if anybody's got ideas for how to better communicate, I'm all ears. It's part of why we're trying to have so many conference calls. I feel like we'll be conference called to death, but the department head team, elected city, town, village, municipal leaders, chiefs of police, and so public safety people, I'll just put in one bucket, nonprofit leaders. We're starting to map out what does a faith leader conference call look like. There's a lot of those, by the way. It's unbelievable how many churches we have in this county. Nonprofits, reaching all of them. And then when you get information as well in those capacities, we'll tell you if you can share it or not. I mean, unfortunately for Washington County, that's, I think, the best we can do.
Supervisor Sarsi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had a little discussion in administrative about it. I think the main thing we need to do is we all need to not panic. We gotta pull back the reins. I mean, I know it's a serious situation. We all know it is. But I'm with President Trump. We're gonna get through this. We are gonna get through this. We just gotta keep a positive attitude and wash your hands and use the wipes and just keep it positive. The world's not coming to an end. But we all got to pull together and just keep our head on, take it a day at a time. Josh made the statement there, which is right. Take it a day at a time. Whatever happens, happens. But we are going to get through this, so just keep the faith.
Supervisor Mary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the basic fact is we've all just been thrown into an extraordinary situation in all of our lives. And I think we should commend all the staff and the leadership of the county for developing the plans you've gotten, and we appreciate your time you're putting into it. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Supervisor Best.
Thank you, sir. Josh, I can see the look on your face, the anguish that's going through your body right now. I appreciate all the work you went through. I do have a question here. Supervisor Kelly talks about the casket company making all these caskets. You just said 100,000 people are going to be affected by this. Do you have any indication as to, all 100,000 going to be put in these caskets? Or is it, do you have a percentage? Are they telling you anything? So I'm hearing gloom and gloom right now, and I understand it, but...
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
It is not all doom and gloom. Can I just give me a minute to shuffle through all my papers and check? Just bear with me for a second. Well, I guess I don't have it immediately in front of me. The last information that I saw is that 4% of people who contract the virus will die from it, and so that's a relatively low number. But the flu is, I believe, 1/10 or 2/10% of people who get it will die from it. Okay. So if you think about that, It's an exponential increase. When you look at some of the numbers that they're projecting of the number of folks who could die, in Wisconsin alone, one of the projections I saw, there could be 8,000 people just in Wisconsin. Of course, if you multiply that across the country, it's hundreds of thousands of people. And I can tell you, because the Journal Sentinel, or TMJ4 just announced that 2 people in Wisconsin have died today. So it's here. Folks are going to die. Now, keep in mind, there's dozens of cases, so 2 out of dozens of positive tests, and there's probably, quite frankly, hundreds of cases in the state that we don't know about. But people will die from it. There's no doubt about that. When I walk the halls of the county, I tell people, many of us who work here will get it, and most all of us will survive it, but that means most all of us will survive it, which means some of us won't survive it. And so, like you've heard this all a million times, we're trying to bend the curve. We're trying not to overwhelm the healthcare system. This is literally all happening to protect the most frail in our society. That 4%, I can tell you, when you look at China, when you look at South Korea, when you look at Italy, the fatalities, the mortality from this is people who are 70 years old, 80 years old, older, and or have frail immune systems for some reason, particularly the lungs. So those are the folks that we're really talking about in terms of mortality. But for every one of us who gets it from not following the guidelines, the likelihood of passing it on to somebody in that category is very high. And so that's why we're doing it. And we're doing it because the slower that it trickles out, the easier our healthcare system can absorb it. So it's really those 2 things. And we are saving lives by doing it, but at the end, we're human beings, and people are going to die. Death is part of life. So, I mean, we got to acknowledge that, but at the same time, we do everything we can to mitigate it.
Well, I get that. I get all that. But I think just listening here for a while, it was like, man, it seemed like this is just the end of the world is coming around the corner. I just wanted to make that aware of it, because one thing I'm concerned about, if this keeps dragging on, it doesn't, I'm concerned about in 2 weeks, it's going to be fine. If you're being confined in 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, the mass ain't going to handle this. They're going to come out. And that's going to be a real big problem, because they're not going to handle being stuck in the house for 4 weeks. So
I worry mightily about I'm pretty protective of our resources. It's why the proposal you're seeing is what you're seeing, because I'm worried about 3 or 4 weeks from now. People, look, we're having problems, and I don't mean we, as in you and I, but society is having problems with closing bars and restaurants. People going to bars anyway. I don't know if you watched St. Patty's Day, but there was less people, but there were still people. We're like 4 days in, and that's happening. If we get into a San Francisco situation, I really worry. Dane County has a place on their website, and I'm told it's other places too, but Dane County has a place on their website where you can report your neighbors if they're meeting with too many people. So there's this, when I said that we're really battling 2 fronts, one is the virus and another is the panic, that's what I'm talking about. We're in many ways infringing on people's constitutional rights right now, and the farther along that gets, the sooner we're going to hit a spot where folks in Rhinelander are going to say, you know what, screw this, I'm not putting up with it anymore. And I pick on Rhinelander, it's probably in Colesville, but the bottom line is people just aren't going to tolerate this for a long period of time. And so, I worry about that a lot. And I know that the sheriff is one of the members of our incident command team. And you're like, why? This is a health crisis. Well, that's why. Because I know he has had, and I know other sheriffs have had conversations with bar owners, like, you're going to have people in there, have them in, and if you're doing whatever you're doing, fine. You start bringing 50 people in, don't make me call you again. I mean, we're just trying to keep people alive.
Okay, I think we really are blessed with the leadership we have within Washington County. The team that Josh has put together is doing an awesome job. Every meeting I've been at, I always stand amazed as to how they're able to logically put together a plan of attack. And as this goes along, as I read more and more documentation and stay off of Facebook, we shouldn't worry about this disease, but we should respect it. If we respect it, we can defeat it. And it goes along with what Josh talked about before too, the culture of respect that we have with our employees in Washington County. And I really, when I say that they're the finest, I truly believe that. They are ready to step up. They're ready to step up and go clean a jail if they have to go clean a jail. Everybody is, from a person to person, they want to help. They want to make sure that we survive this, that we come out of this on top. They're engaged, they're involved, they want to do it. So I think our staff here is second to none. Thank you.
I'm going to read a press release that was just, when I said that every meeting that we have gets interrupted, Governor Evers just put out a press release together with, I'll just read the first paragraph and you'll get the gist of it. Together with state health officials at the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, Governor Tony Evers today confirmed 2 deaths in Wisconsin due to COVID-19. The first death was a male in his 50s from Fond du Lac County. The second death was a male in his 90s from Ozaukee County.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote on this by roll call, correct? All right. We're voting on the resolution. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Our next meeting date will be Tuesday, April 21st. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, 2019 ordinance 19, appointment of superintendent of shelter care.
This is not actually going to be an ordinance. Ethan and I were working on this late in the day yesterday, and we had to beat the agenda deadline to get something out. And upon further review, we determined that an ordinance change is not necessary. What this is the county board under 938.22 of the Wisconsin statutes is required to appoint a superintendent of shelter care. We don't have one at this point, and we haven't had one looking back at our code that I can find anyway. The reason this is important is because, as you may be aware right now, Norris is being contracted with to run our youth treatment facility, our shelter, and they're putting in an application to be approved by the state so they can take that operation over. Part of that application requires them to indicate who the county's superintendent of shelter care is, so the state can find out who that person is, and by law we're supposed to have one. What I'm going to recommend tonight is that the county board appoint the Human Services Director as the superintendent of shelter care as a standing appointment. Currently that position is held by Julie Driscoll, so by default she would be the superintendent of shelter care at this time, but that appointment would technically stand in the event she leaves employment here at Washington County. The next person who comes in who fills that role would take over in that position. We wanted to get this on the agenda as soon as possible. We rushed it on tonight because it's important that that application be completed and the state approves Norris so we can get our shelter care facility back up and running. It's been down for a while as we were moving in a new direction, and so that's why we asked for that vote tonight to confirm that appointment. Thank you.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I'm raising my hand.
Chris, Supervisor Dice, Supervisor Schleif. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote on this. All in favor, signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, I think we got everything now. Next meeting date, Tuesday, April 21st, 2020, 7:30 a.m. So it's going to be a morning meeting. We are hereby adjourned. Thank you.
Yeah, I can